morning to everybody. Today I am going to continue with our discussion of Kathavattu. In our last session, we concluded the basic 18 modes of analysis. It is interesting that in the Kathavattu, 18 modes are given by names. However, in addition to the 18 modes, there are several other modes which are not given by any specific name. In fact, when I was thinking about it, I could not see a reason why a specific name was not given. I'm sure there must be a reason why a specific name was not given, but I'm not sure. Maybe when you read carefully, you might come up with some idea why these modes have not been given any specific name. However, I'm going to deal with them as additional modes, and also I gave some names to these modes. So, these names you find are. So, not specifically mentioned. And then the examination with reference to the utterances of the Buddha is the ultimate mode employed, not only in the issue of Pudgala, but also in all other issues, both Sakavadi and Paravadi. Now, one very important mode coming in this, among these modes is what I would like to call Buddha Vachana Anuyoga, using the word of the Buddha. Now, that is something very interesting because both Paravadi and Sakavadi uses this mode. Paravadi quotes from the Buddha and Sakavadi also quotes from the Buddha. So it is very interesting to see how anyone is going to decide who is correct, because both Sakavadi and Paravadi have textual support. So, so therefore that is, that's interesting. And so we will briefly look at these modes. Number one is examination by becoming. I call it Bhava Anuyoga. The issue is examined with reference to the concept of Bhava by attributing to it characteristics such as impermanent, constructed, sankhata, dependently arisen, paticcasamuppanna, having the nature of being exhausted, kaya dhamma, having the nature of getting decayed, vaya dhamma, having the nature of non-attachment, viraga dhamma, having the nature of cessation, nirodha dhamma, it has vinirodha dhamma, and having the nature of change, viparinama dhamma. So, when you read the text, you can see that the Pudgala issue is examined with reference to Bhava. Now, for example, if Bhava is Anicca, whether the Pudgala is Anicca. If Bhava is Sankhata, whether Pudgala is Sankhata. If Bhava is Kaya Dhamma, Vaya Dhamma, Viraga Dhamma, Nirodha Dhamma, Viparinama Dhamma. So, does the Pudgala have these characteristics? So, examination goes in that manner. So, that is what I would like to call Bhavana Yoga. Number two is examination by feeling, Vedanana Yoga. The issue is examined with reference to the modes of feeling such as pleasurable, sorrowful, and neither pleasurable nor sorrowful. Sukha, dukkha, adukkhama sukha. So again, the Pudgala issue is analyzed according to the Vedana experience by Pudgala. Pudgala experiences Vedana. So then the question is whether Pudgala is found in real and ultimate sense. If there is a Pudgala who is aware that he feels pleasure, does that Pudgala exist? So you are making use of the category of Vedana. Because there is a person who is feeling, then the question is asked whether the Pudgala exists if there is a person who experiences. Now, philosophically, each of these methods is very important. Now, one way to establish the Pudgala or Atma is considered to be the experiencer. Now you remember in the Sanyutta Nikaya, there is this one of the Nidana Vagga Suttas. There is the question, so karoti, so patisangvedeti. Anyo karoti, anyo patisangvedeti. So there are these two questions. Karoti means does some action. Patisangvedeti means experiences the result. So karoti, so patisangvedeti, whether the doer and the experiencer are the same. Anyo karoti, anyo patisangvedeti, whether the doer and the experience are different. So, this question has been discussed in the discourses by the Buddha himself. So here you can see that by making use of the category of Vedana, feeling, Pudgala is examined. Number 3, examination by establishment of mindfulness, Satipatthana Anuyoga, Satipatthana. The issue is examined with reference to the 4 bases of mindfulness, Kaya, Vedana, Chitta, Dhamma. So, making use of the 4 bases of mindfulness, again, if a person is available, whether, that person, if person is experiencing Kaya, Vedana, Chitta, Dhamma, whether that person is available. Then I asked this question, why only Satipatthana? What about Indriya, Bala, Bojjhanga, etc.? Now, if you take Satipatthana, Satipatthana is one category among 37 Bodhipakkhiya Dhamma, right? But then, why only Satipatthana has been used? Maybe you can equally use other categories like Pancha Indriya, Pancha Bala, Satta Bojjhanga, etc. But only this has been used. Again, I do not have an answer, but if you have any answer to that question, you are welcome to come up. And then we have number 4, as I mentioned earlier, examination by appeal to the discourses. I call it Buddha Vachana Anuyoga. Both Sakavadi and Paravadi quote from the discourses in support of their standpoints. Now, Paravadi quotes the following. He quotes following, references from the discourses. Sunyato lokang avekhasu mogharaja sadasatu. Now, this is Sanyutta Nikaya discourse where Buddha addresses Mogharaja. Sunyato lokang avekhasu mogharaja sadasatu. Now, the Paravadi quotes this particular discourse to prove that, there is a Pudgala. Then number 2 is one of the most important references for Paravadi, Atti Puggalo Attahitaya Patipanno. Now, there are many suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya, Atti Puggalo, Attahitaya Patipanno, Attantapo, Parantapo, and all kinds of, if you particularly look at Anguttara Nikaya, there are so many. Then number 3, Ekapuggalo loke upajjamano upajjati, Bahujanahitaya, so on, Bahujanahitaya, and so on. So again, there are in the Anguttara Nikaya lots of discourses referring to Ekapuggala, Dve Puggala, Tayo Puggala, and so on. So Paravadi quotes these things in support of his position. He wants to prove that, look, Buddha has accepted Pudgala. Okay, Sakavadi quotes the following. Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. So that's one of the things Sakavadi quotes, Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. Number 2, Dukkha Dhammang Uppajjamanang Uppajjati, and so on. Now, Dukkha Dhammang Uppajjamanang Uppajjati means what arises is only the dukkha. So you can see there Buddha doesn't refer to a person. Without reference to a person, you just talk about arising of dukkha. But you don't talk about arising of dukkha in whom. So that question is not mentioned. So simply you talk about impersonally. Dukkha dhammang uppajjamanang uppajjati. Dukkha arises. But you don't talk about the person who is suffering from that. Kinnu sattosi paccesi mara ditti gatannute. So addressing the Mara, this is again Mara Sanyutta in the Sanyutta Nikaya. Buddha asked from the Mara, Kinnu Sattosi Pachesi. Mara, whom do you consider to be a Satta? I'm sorry, Kinnu Sattoto, that is wrong, Sattoti. That's a spelling mistake, I must correct it. Sunyoloko ti bhante vucchati. That's next reference quoted by Sakavadi. Attani va bhikkave asati attaniyang meti asati. Now that's another quotation. And the sixth one is Tayo me seniya sattaro santo sangvidyamana lokasmi. And so on. Now, something very interesting in this quoting the Buddha Vachana is something very interesting because both Sakavadi and Paravadi quote Buddha Vachana. One important thing that comes up with this is, now usually we know that with the evolution of the Nikayas, each Nikaya had their own versions of Dhamma and the Vinaya, right? Like today we have discovered so many versions of Vinaya, like Sarvastivadi, Mula Sarvastivadi, Dharmaguptika, Theravada, and so on, right? I mean, differences are minor, but still there are versions of Vinaya. In the same manner, in Chinese translations, you know that there are different versions of, say, Majjhima Nikaya and other Nikayas that belong to Nikayas. But here something very interesting, I have not found anywhere Sakavadi or Paravadi or debating or questioning the quotations. Now when Paravadi quotes something, Sakavadi can always say, look, Buddha has not said this. Where has the Buddha said this? You can ask those questions. But Sakavadi never asked those questions. And when the Sakavadi quotes word of the Buddha, Paravadi can do the same thing. Paravadi can ask, where do you get this? But that question has never been raised. Now, this suggests that there was no problem about the text. Text was accepted by both Sakavadi and Paravadi. Maybe perhaps Katavattu signifies a stage in the history of Buddhism where, these groups agreed upon basically about the text. Now, this is something very interesting, Reverend, because when you study the history of Buddhism, particularly the Nikaya, evolution of the Nikayas, it's very interesting how the textual traditions were, maintained by different traditions. So, differences are not many really, but there can be minor differences. You remember I told you this story about Purana after the first Sanghayana. The Arahant who did the first Sanghayana, they wanted to accept Purana Thera to accept what they did. But then he politely said that, well, you must have done it very well, but I will hold the way I have heard from the Buddha. Now, which means that Purana Thera's version of the word of the Buddha was different from what we have today. But we don't know what it is because we don't know where Purana went and we don't know what happened to their tradition. So we don't have it. But we know that there were maybe slight differences. Maybe there were certain suttas not accepted by Purana and other traditions. Even in the Theravada tradition, when you look at the commentaries, there are certain places where Buddha Ghosha says, no, this sutta doesn't have anything new. So, he rejects it. So, there are places like that. So, there can be always textual discrepancies, differences. But the interesting thing is here, there is no debate about that. Both Sakavadi and Paravadi accept the textual references given. Okay? That's number one. There is another even more important thing here. Now, when both Sakavadi and Paravadi quote the word of the Buddha, how are you going to decide who is winning or who is losing? Who has more support or who has less support? How are you going to decide? Now, if you just count the number of references, you can see that in this Pudgala Katha case, Paravadi has 3 references, Sakavadi has 6 references, right? So in other words, you can say that Paravadi has less references and the Sakavadi has more references. But can we take this to be Paravadi losing or Sakavadi winning? Hardly, because it is difficult. Basically because, now if you take some Paravadi's statement like Eka Puggalo Bhikkave Loke Uppajjamano Uppajjati. Now, if you look at Anguttara Nikaya, how many suttas are there like that? Eka Puggalo, Dve Puggala, Tayo Puggala, right? I mean, there can be practically hundreds of suttas like that. So, Paravadi could quote all these suttas, right? In support of his position. So, so by counting the instances, I don't think we can decide who is strong or who is weak, right? Then what are we going to do with this? Both Sakavadi has the support of the Buddha, Paravadi also has the support of the Buddha. So, what is the situation? Okay.
We depends on the language.
Pardon me?
We depends on the language.
Yeah, you close. Not exactly venerable language. Actually, it depends on ultimately how you interpret. Not language. How you interpret the text. Because the texts are in support of both.
Because Paravadi is used Sanskrit language.
No, in here, of course, we don't know because both quote in Pali. Both quote, yeah. In here, both quote in Pali. Now, the important distinction is this. Important distinction is, this distinction. Nita, Atha, Nitatha, Neyatha. Now, this distinction given in one of the discourses. Interestingly, as far as I know, there is only one discourse with referring to this distinction. But this distinction is something very important. Buddha says that if anyone confuses this distinction, he is destroying my Dhamma. In other words, Buddha says that if someone takes Nitatha Desana to be Neyatha and Neyatha Desana to be Nitatha, Buddha says that he is destroying my Dhamma. Now you can see that this is something very important to determine whether a particular sutta is Nitatha or Neyatha. Now what is Nitatha, what is Neyatha? Nita is a past participle. So Nita, this comes from Nayati, Nita. So Nita means the meaning has been brought in. Simply we say the direct meaning. Now Neya again comes from the same root Nayati. Neya means meaning to be brought. Meaning has to be brought in. Now this is usually translated as indirect meaning. So there are certain suttas with direct meaning and there are certain suttas with indirect meaning. Now, direct meaning suttas, Nitatha Desana are where Buddha simply says that there is no Satto, there is no Pudgala. Now, Kinnu Sattosi Pacchesi. That type of discourses are very direct, where Buddha says there is no Satta, there is no Puggala. Nisatto, Nijivo, Sunyo. So, those are Nita Atha. Directly Buddha says that there is no Satto Pudgala, implicating that there is no Atma. However, what about the other so many discourses where Buddha talks about Eka Puggalo Bhikkave Loke Uppajjamano Uppajjati. There arises one person in the world, Bahujana Hitaya, Bahujana Sukhaya, for the happiness of many. Or Buddha says, there arises a person in the world, Bahujana Ahitaya, unhappiness or unwelfare of many people, so on and so forth. Now, what about those discourses? How are you going to interpret them? Now, in a way, Paravadi want to say that, look, here Buddha says there is a Puggalo. How can you say that Buddha doesn't say there is a Puggala? So he can say that there is a Pudgala, because Buddha talks about Pudgala. Now on the one hand, there are other discourses where Buddha says there is no Satta Pudgala. But on the other hand, here Buddha clearly says that there is a Pudgala. Now, you can see that there is a distinction or difference in the way of using language. Now, when you listen to the Buddha or when you read the discourses, you will have to understand actually what is meant by the Buddha. Now, if you confuse these two meanings, you are in trouble. For example, take this incident. When Buddha was almost attained parinirvana, he was going with Venerable Ananda and monks. Buddha became thirsty and Buddha addressed Ananda. Ananda, I am tired. Kilantos me, bring me some water. Right? Now, if Ananda did not understand this correctly, what will happen? If you confuse these two meanings, Ananda could say, who is I? Who is getting thirsty? Who wants water? Can you say that? Now, here Buddha says that, Ananda, I am thirsty. Give me some water. There you have to understand it in a correct manner. Of course, it doesn't mean that there is a substantial person or Pudgala or Atma, but on the other hand, empirically, experientially, there is a person who is hungry or who is thirsty, who is feeling tired. I mean, there you can't apply Nitatha Desada. So in other words, you have to really make the distinction between Nitatha and Neyatha. For example, you take entire Vinaya Pitaka. Entire Vinaya Pitaka is Neyatha Desana, right, in a way. Because Buddha talks about people who are committing wrong things and, Buddha gives punishment and comes up with the Sikkhapadas and, so on and so forth. Now, if there is no really a Sattva and Pudgala, who is doing any wrong thing? So again, you can see in the entire Vinaya Pitaka is Neyatha Desana in a way, right? So here is very interesting. Ultimately, the point is, the whole thing depends on how you interpret the word of the Buddha, or how you understand the word of the Buddha. Now, if you look at, again, those examples given by two people, it's a matter of interpretation. It looks like Paravadi thinks that when the Buddha says, Ekapuggalo bhikkhave loke uppajjamano uppajjati, Paravadi want to interpret it as Nitattha Desana. And the Sakavadi want to say that, no, that is a Neyatha Desana. Right? I mean, that is the distinction. So, almost all these instances where you can see that Paravadi quotes, Paravadi seems to be thinking that what he quotes is Nitattha. Direct meaning. When Buddha says, Ekapuggalo bhikkhave loke uppajjamano uppajjati, he thinks that Buddha refers to a Pudgala. And on the other hand, Sakavadi want to take all these instances where Buddha talks about there is no Sattva, there is no Pudgala. So ultimately what I would like to lay emphasis is this whole Kathavattu debate. So this particular, the additional modes, Buddha Vachana Anuyogi is something very interesting. Sunyo loko ti bhante uchati. Actually, when we go to read Nagarjuna, you can really see that Nagarjuna is really echoing the same thing, Sunyato lokang avekhasu. Because although we are talking much about Nagarjuna's emptiness, you can see that it has direct relevance to some of these statements. So you will be able to see that. So this Buddha Vachana Anuyogi is something very interesting, because that is both Sakavadi and Paravadi quote in support of. Okay. Now, another very interesting thing in Kathavattu debate is Kathavattu itself does not say anything about these quotations. It simply allows Paravadi to put forth his quotations and Sakavadi to put forth his quotations, but no value judgment. I mean, doesn't say whether he is right or he is right. Now, Katavattu, I mean, if you take Katavattu to be a debating manual, it's very interesting. Katavattu doesn't say at any place who won the debate. There is no winner or loser according to Katavattu. However, when you go to Panchappakarana Attakatha by Buddha Ghosha, there of course Buddha Ghosha says, this is wrong, this is right, this is what happened. But for that knowledge, you have to go to commentary. But if you just look at the Katavattu alone, Katavattu doesn't say anything. Katavattu doesn't say who lost, who won. So that's a very interesting thing, because the way you look at the whole process. Ultimately, both have the Buddha's support. So maybe in this context, Pudgala Katha, you can say, look, you have only 3 and I have 6, something like that. But that is not very convincing. But anyhow, this whole thing hinges on how you interpret, the quotations or the utterances of the Buddha. I remember something not directly connected to Katavattu. Several years ago, I studied this debate about Burmese and Sri Lankan meditation traditions. Burmese tradition says that without samatha, you can go to vipassana. And then Sri Lankan tradition says that, you have to have samatha to go to vipassana. And there was very interesting Dhamma debate between two Sayadaws, one reverend in Sri Lanka and one in Myanmar. All those papers have been published. I did a study and I wrote a fairly long paper on this subject. And I found something very interesting. Finally, both Sayadaws come into this. I mean, finally, it's very interesting. Burmese Sayadaw says, look, this is what the Buddha said. And Sri Lankan Sayadaw says, look, this is what the Buddha said. So, it's very interesting. Ultimately, entire thing depends on how you interpret. How you interpret. Because either you can interpret that, well, Buddha says that, you don't need samatha and go to vipassana, or you have to say that, no, this is how you should read this. You can't read it the way you want. So that is what the Sri Lankan learned monk says. So I mean, it came into my mind because, this very interesting, this whole doctrinal thing, this how to interpret. In the entire Tripitaka, interestingly, this Neyatta and Nitatta distinction is given only one place. But that is one of the most important criterion of how to decide what the Buddha meant by this thing. So how to interpret. Now, because of this, now in a way you can say that entire Pudgalavada problem is a problem created by not properly understanding this distinction, right? Entire Pudgalavada thing, you can say a result of that. And also you can see when you read Katavattupakarana, there are so many other issues. Every issue, both Sakavadi and Paravadi have support from the discourses. So, ultimately you can see that interpretation becomes a very important thing. I talked to you about in several locations, the significance of interpreting. Like how to understand, how to interpret the word of the Buddha. So this, what I would like to call Buddha Vachanana Yoga is, something very interesting in this among the additional debates, and also this is found in all the other subsequent discussions too. Again, this is what I said. Something very interesting that comes up with this practice is that among the disputants belonging to many different sects, including Theravada, there was no question about the authenticity of the text. Authenticity means the correctness of the text quoted. Is this an indication that across Nikayas there was a commonly accepted text? Well, there could be at one point, but of course when the Nikayas were separated, Of course, many Nikayas were geographically and physically separated, so they may have developed their own, the textual traditions. But although each Nikaya had its own textual tradition, that doesn't mean that they don't overlap. I would say larger majority of the sections overlap, right? So maybe these are those overlapping things, or agreed upon by all. I mean, it is possible that there may be minor differences, but there can be a core agreed upon by everybody. So this may be, reference to that. Now, next I will come to what is called examination by conceptual analysis. I call it Sankappa Vibhanganu Yoga. The issue is examined with reference to the analysis of categories of concepts, namely Sappikumbha, Telekumbha, Madhukumbha, Panitakumbha, Kirakumbha, and Udakakumbha. Not a pot made of ghee, etc., but a pot containing ghee, etc. Then, second category, Paniya Talaka, Paniya Kosaka, Paniya Saravaka. Container of water referred to in many dialects. Nityabhatta and Duvabhatta, limits of permanent and certain. Now what is examined here is the contextual nature of language and reality. And implications are drawn for the issue of Pudgala. Now, this last one that is given to, in support of this whole exercise is something very interesting. I would describe this as a philosophical category, because examples given, you can see that nothing to do with Dhamma. They are not Dhamma concepts. Any of the concept given is not a Dhamma concept. So then, how are you going to interpret this? How do you understand it? Now, if you look at carefully, you can see that there are, there are three categories. You can have Sappikumbha, Telekumbha, Madhukumbha, Panitakumbha, Kirakumbha, and also you have Udakakumbha. And then you have Paniya Saravaka, Paniya Kosaka, Paniya Thalaka, and so on. Then you have another category, Nityabhatta, Duvabhatta. Now, one thing is very clear. Sappikumbha, Telekumbha, Paniya Saravaka, Paniya Kosaka, Nityabhatta, Duvabhatta, they are not Dhamma concepts, right? No Four Noble Truths, no Eightfold Path, or nothing, right? They are just very ordinary concepts. Like Udakakumbha is a pot of water. Now, what is really the point of this analysis? When you look at it, you can look at this in a couple of different ways. If you look at here, Sappi, Tela, Madhu, Panita, Kira, Udaka, this is what is called the content. And Kumbha is the container, right? Container. Kumbha is the container. And then what is contained inside the Kumbha is these things. Now here you have Paniya. Paniya means drinking water. However, you have Saravaka, Kosaka, Thalaka. Now you can see these two categories are very different from each other. Here, content is different, but the container is same. Here, content is the same, but the container is different. And then number three, of course, totally different category. Now here, another interesting thing is when you say Udaka Kumbha. Udaka Kumbha is water pot. Now this word can be given two meanings. One meaning is pot containing water, Udaka Kumbha. Pot containing water. Another meaning is pot made of water. You can also give that meaning. Pot made of water, or pot made of sappi, pot made of honey, pot made of milk. I mean, you can give that meaning. But on the other hand, the general meaning we give for this is, Udaka Kumbha is pot of water. Pot of water. However, here, Paniya is drinking water. Saravaka, Kosaka, Thalaka are different words used during this period to refer to the same thing, container. So, Paniya Kosaka, Paniya Thalaka, Paniya Saravaka all mean the same thing. However, even though all mean the same thing, the words are different. You can say in some region it is called Saravaka, in some region it is called Kosaka, in some region it is called Thalaka or whatever. Now, again you can see that in a way you can say that words are different, but they mean the same thing. Right? I mean, Kosaka, Saravaka, Thalaka doesn't mean three different things. But this is how the same thing is being referred to in different areas. Okay? Now, for example, if you say dog, you have a word for dog in Burmese, we have a word for dog in Sinhala, and every language. But dog doesn't differ, right? Only the language differs because, I mean, same object, different people call it differently. And then look here, Nicha Bhatta. What is Nicha? Nicha means permanent. Dua means, you can say everlasting, also mean permanent. So, Nicha Bhatta, Dua Bhatta. Permanent meal, Bhatta means meal, permanent meal and everlasting meal. What does it mean? What is the Nicha Bhatta? Usually what is Nicha Bhatta? It's something like this. In the video you know that suppose you get midday meal from same house practically every day, you call it Nicha Bhatta, right? Or Dua Bhatta, same meaning. However, does that mean that that meal is permanent? That means you are going to get it every day, like throughout entire lifetime? No. I mean, although we use the word nicha, it doesn't mean nicha. I mean, it doesn't mean everlasting. We can say within these 3 months, you get nicha bhatta. So, nicha means only 3 months. Maybe Vasana season, you get nicha bhatta from some house. Or you get duha bhatta from some people. But that doesn't mean the bhatta is everlasting or lasting forever, or you are going to get it until you attain nirvana or something like that. No, nothing like that. But simply we use the language in such a manner that, this concept. Now, what is the whole point of all this discussion? As I said earlier, this discussion has nothing to do with Dhamma. But what does this discussion mean? Now, I say here, what is examined? Very last 2 sentences. What is examined here is the contextual nature of language. Contextual nature of the language. Language does not have permanent, solid meanings. Okay? Language is context means a particular situation where we use language. Like in a particular situation, in the Buddhist monastic Vinaya, we use the term Nichabhatta to refer to something. However, if we go to, say, Dhamma discussion, Nicho, Dhuo, Sassato, Aviparinama Dhammo. Now, what does that mean? There, of course, it is not like Nichabhatta. There we are talking about something Nicho, Dhuo, Sassato. Sassata means everlasting. Aviparinama Dhammo, it doesn't change. So you can see the same set of words are being given two different meanings in two different contexts, right? So this is what is meant by the contextual use of language, contextual use of language. In other words, in a more philosophical language, we are talking about language and reality. Now this connection, language and reality, although it looks a fancy thing, actually it's a pretty simple thing. We have words, and then with the words we refer to things. Now I say pen, so I write it P-E-N, so that is language, but there is an object, reality. So we can say language and reality, or language and object. We say chair, and there is an object there, right? So like that. Now, usually we understand language as referring to things. When I say pen, this word refers to some object. When I say chair, it refers to something. So that's pretty simple level. However, when we go little bit deeper, we can see that this one-to-one relationship is not the only relationship. Like as we know, when you say Nichabhatta, word says one thing, we understand something little different, right? Word says Duabhatta, but we know that Duabhatta can be only Dua for 1 week or 3 months. That's it. But still we call it Duabhatta. So you see that we are using this word in a somewhat different manner. So the connection between language and reality is there. Something fluid, like changing. And same thing here. Paniya Saravaka, Paniya Kosaka Thalaga. So when you go to different places, people use different words. But sometimes, in like any country, Sri Lanka is small country, but Burma is big country. So you have many different dialects, many different words people are using. Like from that corner to this Mandalay to the other side, the Yangon, language different. But then sometimes people fight over these things. Oh, you heard this thing, that's a, bad word, and, things like that. But simply what it means is, you may be using different terms, different words to refer to the same thing. So it doesn't really matter. Language and reality is the connection between language and reality is something the sammuti. Sammuti means some kind of convention. Okay, some kind of convention. So it doesn't really matter. Now here you can see that you are calling Sappikumbha or Udakakumbha. Of course, what you mean is Udakakumbha is not pot made of water, but pot containing water. Now even Udakakumbha can have another meaning. Kumbha full of water, or kumbha we use to carry water. Now English language, if we say pot of water and water pot, two different meanings, right? If I say pot of water, that means pot full of water. But if I say water pot may not have water in it or, whatever. So again, you can see that, this fluid nature of the language is. Now, why Kathavattu gives this last thing? I mean, Kathavattu, Pudgalavada discussion, this is the last aspect. When we look at the text, you will see that we will look at the text, but I'm just giving you the idea, prior to going into the text. But you have to think that why Kathavattu comes up to this point. Now, ultimately, it looks like whole debate about Pudgala is something where you have misunderstood language. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's very interesting because it indicates that ultimately you have been fighting over something, but if you really had good understanding about your language, this problem is not there. Yeah, this is very interesting because there are schools of modern Western philosophy. Particularly, I referred to the philosopher called Wittgenstein in one of my early discussions. I mean, he says that the origin of all philosophical problems misunderstanding of the grammar of the language. So if you understand language correctly, there are no philosophical problems. That's what he said. But in a way, it reminds me, this reminds me of Wittgenstein, because you can see that why Kathavattu concludes Puddala Katha discussion with this is to show that ultimately the connection between language and reality plays a very, very important role in this whole thing. Let me see. These are the additional modes we have been discussing, and then next thing I would want to do with you is to go into the logical structure of the Kathavattu. But before going into it, maybe I will open up for discussion if you have any questions about these things. Yes, sir? You have a question? No, I said you, no? Okay.
So I will ask.
Yeah.
In the four, additional mode, number 4.
Uh-huh.
So
Number 4 is Buddha Vachananuyoga, right?
yeah.
Okay. Examination by appeal to the discourses.
So one interesting thing here, the ghost station different two schools,
Mm-hmm.
in Parawadi and Theravadi.
Right.
But for the Theravadi, we use the Pali language.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But to me, to my understand, Parawadi,
Yeah.
they belong to another tradition.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Maybe they use another language, maybe Sanskrit or
Forms of Prakrit.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. Uh-huh.
But here,
Everything is given in Pali.
same, in Pali.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, Reverend. I think that's you're right, because not all used Pali, and then of course use of Sanskrit came a little bit later, like Sarvastivada, Vaibhashika. Maybe these schools evolved after about more than 3 centuries. However, right after the parinirvana of the Buddha, you can see that there may have been different dialects or different types of Prakruta. You know this word Prakruta and Sanskrita, right? Sanskrita means modified, constructed. Prakruta means original, unmodified, unconstructed, primitive. So what happened was, actually Sanskrit is the language, modified form of language created by Brahmins. It's in a way kind of artificial language, because they did not want to have their mantras and the text in everyday changing language. This is why this Yamelu and Thekula, 2 monks, followers, wanted to translate the word of the Buddha into Chandas, Sanskrit language. Buddha said no. Prakruta means, the not constructed, so very original. It's like how people just spoke, ordinary people. So Pali is a kind of Prakrit. And there may have been other Prakrits by this time. However, your question is important. Why only Pali? I mean, this is a Pali book, so reported by Theravadins. So maybe they put all these things into a Pali form. But even though they put it into the Pali form, these Prakrit versions are pretty similar with each other. I mean, differences are very minor. So basically, the quotations are pretty much the same, I would say. So it doesn't make a big difference. It's not like translating from Pali to English or something. Say, for example, Pali to Ardha Magadhi. If you look at the Jaina text, I mean, if you know Pali, you can sort of understand Ardha Magadhi. You can sort of.
At that time, Parawadi and Theravadi was not so much different.
I would consider, because this is a pretty much early stage really. I mean, of course, if we believe that this happens in the Dharmashoka's period, still we are talking about 250 to 300 years. But the real divisions came subsequently and gradually going into Sanskrit, Sarvastivada and, those traditions. But again, very often this particular Sanskrit is called Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit because they are very close to Pali. They are very close to Pali, yeah. Anything else? Yes, sir. Paravadi, yes. Yeah.
Another set away from Theravada, especially Buddhism. I mean the Mahayana. Okay, at that time, can we account Hinduism or another set in Brahmani?
I didn't get your last two words.
Brahmani,
Yeah.
we had to account another set,
Yeah.
such as the Mahayana or
Actually, the Mahayana was not really within the area during this time. Mahayana was still emerging. But, all these discussions were among the so-called other Nikayas, like, that Nikayas that originated after the second Sangha. That means 100 years after. So from 100 years to Ashoka's time is the period. So it's not really Mahayana in that sense. Yeah, it's...
For instance, many sets, apart from Theravada,
Yes, yeah.
has already appeared in
Mm-hmm.
the shop, multiple Theravada. At that time, he aimed to project to give the clear explanation of pure explanation of Theravada. So he had to write this Kathamutu, and he projected another round view. We can account in this Brahmani, Hinduism or Persian like this, and another's idealism come to account.
In fact, in the course of our discussion, you will see that although in the Theravada accounts, we are told that third Sanghana was conducted in order to clean up the sasana and, also to answer these questions. But, interestingly, in the Kathavattu, by reading just the debate, Kathavattu doesn't give a verdict. Kathavattu doesn't say who won the debate. Kathavattu doesn't say who lost the debate. That's very interesting. You just read Kathavattu, you don't know who won the debate really. But then, you have to really go through it carefully and make your own judgment about it. But Kathavattu doesn't say. So, it's true, like Kathavattu was composed. But there is another idea, another way to look at Kathavattu. Kathavattu was also a debating manual, teaching the Buddhist Sangha to how to debate, how to have this kind of discussion, how to have Dhamma discussion, debate in a decent and methodical manner. But if Kathavattu was out and out to defeat the opponent, then Kathavattu will directly say that, like this. But, here it is like that. Paravadi says that you lost the case, Sakavadi says you lost the case. We have to decide who lost the case. This is something like that. So that way, methodologically, Kathavattu method is a very interesting method. Okay, it indicates ultimately. Even in this Buddha Vacharanu Yoga, there are more quotations to the Buddha, and then we feel that if you really now even in this very last one, Sankappa Vibhanga, like Sappikumba Telakumba, Kathavattu author doesn't say anything, he just put this out, that's all. So we have to read and see ultimately what is the problem is. So he is kind of indicating. Katavattuvata doesn't really say, this is what it is. So always it is an indication. Yeah.
It is ultimately explanation to another set and Theravada. If so, the Katavatthu including 500 Sutta and Theravada and another 500 Sutta from another set. Okay, we see this is a Sutta that we call Abhidhamma Pitaka because this is a Brahmata Pitaka like that. Yeah. Oh, this is a I have ever read widely called Abhidhamma Pitaka. If you have another idea for to account widely account
That's a historically interesting question, Reverend. But Abhidhamma Pitaka has never been referred to here. Not even Abhidhamma, but even Vinaya. There are no Vinaya questions discussed. There are no Abhidhamma questions discussed. My personal view is maybe Abhidhamma Pitaka was not complete by that time, but you don't have to accept that. That's how I see that. But simply we can say that Sutta was the most authoritative word of the Buddha according to any tradition. So they just go by the suttas. But problems are not put in the Abhidhamma manner, because Abhidhamma problems are put in the Abhidhamma, there is Abhidhamma method, right? Suttanta Bhajaniya and Abhidhamma Bhajaniya. So there is a different method. No, the questions are not put in that manner. I think historically maybe Abhidhamma Pitaka was not complete by this time. That's one reason. The other thing was the matters were more fundamental. Because if you don't have any questions about the Dhamma, then there cannot be questions about Abhidhamma. But if you have questions about the Dhamma, then of course that's more important. Yeah. Okay, folks, why don't we take 5-6 minutes short break, and then we will get together again. Thank you. Okay. In this part of the discussion, I'm going to look at the structure of the debate and also the logical aspect of the debate. Now, these two things, the structure and the logical principles involved, are connected. But it's very interesting to see that when we look at Kathavattu, we see some of the concepts that are found in Indian and Buddhist logic subsequently. But during this time, of course, Buddhist logic was not developed as a separate the Vidya or separate science. Buddhist logic developed by about 4th, 5th and 6th centuries by Dinnaga and Dharmakirti. But the basic concepts of Buddhist logic were there. And also, if you take the Nyaya, Indian Brahmanic logical system, Indian Brahmanic logical system was also there. But of course, again, at the preliminary stage. So, Kathavattu in that sense is very important when you look at the history of Indian logic and history of Buddhist logic. Okay? So, this is one way to look at Kathavattu, as indicating, as marking early stage of Indian logic and early stage of Buddhist logic. So, you can see logical, say, syllogism. Syllogism is a logical statement. What are the aspects of syllogism? So you can see these things gradually starting. And also, I will show you towards the end of this discussion, Kathavattu uses certain logical system or principles that are very much recognized today in the modern Western logic. You know, but it is very interesting. In a way, you can say that Kathavattu author knew these modern logical rules, but actually it is not that. Logical rules have been made in any tradition consistent with rational thinking, how to make a conclusion rationally. So you can see that there can be certain principles shared by different cultures all over the world. Now, on the one hand, we can say that logical systems differ from culture to culture. We have Western logic, we have Eastern logic, and then in the Eastern logic we have Indian logic, we have Buddhist logic basically, and then Jaina logic is also there. So like different logical systems. In the West, up to very recent time, up to the last century, or even 19th century, we can say, it was the Aristotelian logic that was in the West. There was no any other logic. Logic was basically Aristotelian logic. However, different logical systems started coming up, starting from the end of the 19th century and in the 20th century. So, logical systems going against Aristotelian system have come up. So there are different logical systems. Nevertheless, there can be certain principles that are overlapping in these systems. I will show you how we can see some of these logical principles. First, we will try to understand the structure of the debate. Attha Niggaha. Niggaha is the refutation. Now, Niggaha, Sanskrit word is Nigraha. Nigrahasthana. Nigraha is a technical term in Indian logic and Indian debate. Now, Nigrahasthana means defeating point. Now, in your system, if you come to a Nigrahasthana with your opponent, then of course, if you can show to your opponent that opponent has a Nigrahasthana, that means it's a defeating point. So, Nigraha in that sense has a technical meaning. In the debate here, it has 8 forms of refutation. That is what is called Attha Niggaha. Sakavadi presents 5-fold affirmative presentation, Anuloma Panchaka, namely merely referring to the reality of Pudgala, now Suddha Sachikatta, followed by 4-fold rejoinder, Patikamma Chatukka, Niggaha Chatukka, Upanaya Chatukka, Nigamana Chatukka. So basically Anuloma Panchaka comes with other 4, so that is called affirmative presentation. Nigamana means conclusion. So ultimately you have Nigamana. Now Paravadi presents the 5-fold adverse presentation, Pachanika Panchaka. So Sakavadi comes with Anuloma Panchaka, Paravadi comes with Pachanika Panchaka, merely referring to the reality of Pudgala Suddha. Now, there are many different ways of referring to this, but the first one is Suddha. That means you are just referring to the Pudgala, followed by rejoinder, refutation, application, and conclusion. So, this is basically the structure of this debate. So, if you take Anuloma Panchaka, now, Anuloma Panchaka is presented by Sakavadi. Anuloma Panchaka. So, Anuloma Panchaka refers to the Pudgala. So, it simply goes as Patikamma, Niggaha, Upanaya, Nigamana. So you have Anuloma Panchaka, then you have Patikamma, Niggaha, Upanayana, Upanaya, Nigamana. Now, this is basically what is called, so the first part is like same thing, Anuloma Panchaka, Patikamma, Niggaha, Upanaya, Nigamana. Actually, if you take a look at Upanaya and Nigamana, these two words are used in the standard Nyaya logic, in the syllogism. Syllogism in Sanskrit language is called Samvakya, syllogism. According to Nyaya analysis, a syllogism has these five. Pratigna, Hetu, Udaharana, Upanaya, Nigamana. Now this is what is called Pancha Avayava Vakya, or syllogism according to Nyaya. Now this is Nyaya syllogism. So even today, up to today, this is the syllogism as accepted by Nyaya. So here you can see Upanaya, Nigamana. Upanaya there, here is to make the connection between the two, the matter debated, and the Nigamana is, the final conclusion. So here also you can see that Upanaya and Nigamana. So that's why I said this particular method of debate marks the beginning of Indian logic in general, and also Buddhist logic in particular. So you have Anuloma, you presented in the Anuloma manner, then Patikamma, Niggaha, Upanaya, Nigamana. So these, when we read the text, we can see that, how it goes. Paravadi present fivefold, Pachanika Panchaka, Pachanika, followed by rejoinder, refutation, Patikamma is rejoinder, Niggaha is refutation, application, and conclusion. So this is Sakavadi, this is Paravadi. Paravadi has Pachanika Panchaka, and then you have the same thing, Patikamma, Niggaha, Upanaya, and Nigamana. So this is basically the what Sakavadi and Paravadi presents. And then Anuloma and Pachanika, you can see that Sakavadi presents the argument in the affirmative manner, and then the Paravadi puts in the negative manner. For example, when Sakavadi puts the argument, Upalabhati Puggalo Satchikatta Paramattena, so in the affirmative language, Paravadi puts is, if the Puggala is not available, and so on, so he presents this in the negative form. Okay, so this is basically the structure of the debate. Now, this is the first two, and then 3 to 5, Sakavadi present from the perspective of space, time, and aspects. Akasha, Kala, Avayava. Now, you will remember when we were discussing the modes, different modes, we had one Chatukkanaya Sansandana, where you look at some particular thing from the perspective of space, time, and aspects. So, Anuloma Panchaka, in addition to this, is presented by space, time, and aspects. So does the Paravadi. Paravadi also puts the same thing, Kala, Akasha, Avayava. So this is number one. We can say Anuloma Panchaka, and then you have 2 Kala, 3 Akasa. Number 4 is Avayava. Same thing, 2, 3, 4. If this is number 1, 2, 3, 4, the same thing. So this is why basic, if we talk about the Atta Niggaha, the basically Sakavadi presents in 4 different manner and the Paravadi presents in the 4 different manner, 4 different arguments. So the initial arguments given in the Suddha only take Pudgala as Pudgala. The second argument is Pudgala and Kala. Third argument is Pudgala and Akasa. And then the final is Pudgala and Avayava. You know, the aspects of the Pudgala. So Paravadi gets 4, Sakavadi gets 4 opportunities, Paravadi gets 4 opportunities. Altogether, we are talking about the 8 opportunities gotten by the 2 people. Okay, so be familiar with this term Paticamma Niggaha Upaniggamana, and then you can see how this thing is used with other categories, Kala, Akasa, Avayava. The debate takes place by means of 5 steps. Puccha, Patinya, Anuyoga, Patikhepa, Niggaha. Now, debate takes place. Now, don't get confused here. Now, the other thing is like face-to-face debate. How does that happen? Now, face-to-face debate starts with Puccha. The first one is you ask the question. Then Patinya. Patinya means the acknowledgement or the thesis. And then you have Anuyoga, engaging the opponent. Patikhepa, rejection of that view. And Niggaha, finally debate or Paticamma, counteraction. So it can be, now look at this example. Puccha is the person known in the sense of real and ultimate fact. Upalabhati Puggalo Sachikatta Paramattena. Now this question is asked by the Sakavadi. Upalabhati Puggalo Sachikatta Paramattena. Paravadi says yes. Then Sakavadi asks, is the person known in the same way as a real and ultimate fact? Yo Sachikatto Paramatto Tatoso Puggalo Upalabhati Sachikatta Paramattena. Then Paravadi says, Nahevang Vattabbe. You must not say so. Then Sakavadi says, Ajanahi Niggaham. So this is basically the argument. So you have, is the person known in the sense of real and ultimate fact? Upalabhati Puggalo Sachikatta Paramattena. Amanta Yo Sachikatto Paramatto Tatoso Puggalo Upalabhati Sachikatta Paramattena. Now the Anuyoga. Anuyoga means engaging in the debate, involvement in the debate. Like Anuyoga has a technical meaning. Anuyoga means Anu Yoga. Yoga means engagement. Anu means accordingly. But engagement accordingly is the literal meaning. What it really means is in a debate, you get your opponent to accept his view and challenge it. So Anuyoga is the main aspect of the debate. If you want to know how it is being used, if you read in the Brahmajala Sutta, there is a discussion about Amaravikepavada. Then some of the people go to Amaravikepavada according to Brahmajala Sutta, Anuyoga Bhaya, because they are scared of Anuyoga. They are scared of being engaged by opponents. Like, in the debate, you are debating with somebody. You are debating in a public place. I mean, your refutation is at stake because, openly, publicly questions are asked. If you cannot answer, then you lose your whole self-respect. This is the basic thing. So, Anuyoga means getting involved in the debate. So, that is Anuyoga. Now, when the person says, Puggalo Upalabhati, then he asks, if the Puggala is Upalabhati, yo Sachikatto Paramatto. Sachikatta and Paramatta is there, and Puggala is available from those points of view. Then Paravadi says no. Okay. Then Sakavadi says, acknowledge the refutation. You are defeated. So, whole simple argument is that. Now, you will see the logical principle behind this next. But before this, going into that, I want you to really see the basic argument, how it goes. So, this is basically how the debate goes. But actually, in the debate, if you take Puccha and Patinja, we can say that we can get rid of Puccha really. It's only what is important is Patinja. Patinja means the thesis. Now, because it is in the verbal debate, you ask the question, then the other person says yes. But actually what it means is basically, Puggalo upalabbati sachikatta paramattena. That's what you want to prove. So it is the Patinja or Pratigna. You remember I used that word when I was discussing Nagarjuna. Particularly in the Swatantrika view, Swatantrika want to say that Nagarjuna has to have a Pratigna. Pratigna means a thesis to be established. So here, Puccha Patinja, although it's two aspects, it means really one. Can you see that? Although two things, Puccha and Patinja, in the actual sense, is only one. Basically, it is the Patinja. But because it is a debate, Sakavadi asks the question, Paravadi says yes. Question and answer. But if you forget about question and answer structure, it simply says, Puggalo upalabbati sachikatta paramattena. That's the thesis you want to prove. But when you put in the logical form and also actual conversational debate, then Sakavadi asks, do you want to say Puggala upalabbati sachikatta paramattena? Then Paravadi says yes. So, but ultimately Paravadi says Puggala upalabbati sachikatta paramattena. Then Anuyoga means, then Sakavadi says, if you accept Puggala is available, known in the real and ultimate sense, you have to admit that real and ultimate facts are there. Accordingly, Puggala is known accordingly. Now, that which means that Sakavadi says that to the Paravadi, if you accept that Puggala is known in the real and ultimate sense, you have to accept that real and ultimate sense is there, and Puggala is there in the real and ultimate sense. Two things. Okay. Now, Paravadi says no to it. You see the point? Because when Paravadi says that Puggala is available in real and ultimate sense, Sakavadi want to say that, look, by saying this, you admit that there are real and ultimate facts, number one. Number two, Puggala is one of those real and ultimate facts. Two things. When Sakavadi analyzes Paravadi's statement into these two things, Paravadi says that, no, I don't want to say that. Then Sakavadi says, Ajanahi Niggahan. Then you are defeated. Because the whole idea is, if you say, Puggala upalabbati sachikatta paramattena, then you have also to say, Anuyoga. The person is, real and ultimate senses are there, the person is known according to them. Okay, now this is basically the debate. The logical principle followed is given in Tapada, Papada, Aropana. Now, next thing in the Kathavattu you will see these three things, Tapada, Papada, Aropana. Now, what are these Tapada, Papada, Aropana? Tapana, Papana. So, This is basically Tapana and Papada. Aropada is again, you say something like, therefore. In my presentation here, I have written this in a little bit different manner. I have put Tapada as if the person is known in the sense of real and ultimate fact, then the person is known in the same way as any other real and ultimate fact is known. Papana, the person is known in the sense of real and ultimate fact. Aropana, therefore the person is known in the same way as any other real and ultimate fact is known. This is the form of a basic modus ponens argument presented by Sakavadi. Now, if you look at carefully, there is a logical argument here. Logical argument in the modern logic is called modus ponens. Modus ponens argument is simply we say MP. Now, modus ponens argument. It goes something like this. If P, then Q. Number 1. Number 2, P. Number 3, therefore, Q. So this is basically the modus ponens argument. If P, then Q, P, therefore, Q. Now, if Pudgala exists real and ultimate sense, you can say that equals P. Forget about then. The person is not real and ultimate sense is known equals Q. Now, P stands for a proposition or a statement. Now, if you look at P, Pudgala exists in real and ultimate sense. That is P. So, if P, then Q. Q means Pudgala is known in the same way as. Now, it's simple like this. If Puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramattena, then yo satchikatto paramatto tatoso Puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramattena. If P, then Q. Then whole argument is, now according to Sakavadi, Paravadi accepts P. Right? Paravadi accepts P, but rejects Q. Then what Sakavadi want to show is, no, you can't do this. Modus ponens argument is, if you accept P, then you have to accept Q. The problem here is, Paravadi says yes to P, but no to Q. So, do you see the logical principle there? I mean, simply we can translate this whole thing into simple logical language, P and Q. So, if P means Puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramattena here, and then Q means Puggalo yo satchikatto paramatto tatoso Puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramattena is Q. So, simple logical language is if P, then Q. Now, if P, then Q, so then you say P. Of course, from that you can conclude Q. Let me give you another example. We say all human beings are mortal. Socrates is human. What is the conclusion? Socrates is mortal. I mean, even you don't have to say that. When you say all human beings are mortal, Socrates is human, conclusion is clear, right? So if you say all human beings are mortal, Socrates is human, can you say Socrates is not mortal? No. You cannot. So if you say all human beings are mortal, Socrates is human, then you have to say that Socrates is mortal. So it is something like this. Sakavadi says, if you say Puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramattena, then you have to say yo satchikatto paramatto tatoso Puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramattena. However, if you say that and you can't reject, yo Satchikatta Paramatto. It's like that Socrates, like the other example. So in other words, simply what Sakavadi want to say is, my friend, if you say Puggalo Upalabhada Satchikatta Paramattena, then you have to admit that there are what is called Satchikatta Paramatta and Puggala as a Satchikatta Paramatta. So actually he is committing to two things, which Paravadi doesn't want to accept. Then simply Sakavadi, what Sakavadi does is, Sakavadi shows that, look, you are logically wrong. Now, interesting thing is, now you might think, did Kathavattu author a new modus ponens? Did he know modus ponens in the 3rd century BCE? Modus ponens is a modern theory. But again, although name is not given, today in the modern logic we have a name given to it, right? But Venables, the principle is there. Principle is there. Simply the principle is there. So it's like in my other example, if you say that all human beings are mortal and Socrates is one of the human beings, then you are naturally saying that Socrates is also mortal. Because within that category you include Socrates also. So you can see here that there is a logical principle called, the modus ponens. Read this. According to Sakavadi, Paravadi affirms the antecedent but denies the consequent. I am using two terms from logic again, antecedent and consequent. Now usually in the logical the language, if P then Q. Now in this statement, P is antecedent, Q is consequent. If P then Q, P is antecedent, Q is consequent. Now here what happens is, according to Sakavadi, Paravadi affirms the antecedent. He accepts antecedent, he accepts P, but denies the consequent. Consequent means Q. But when you affirm the antecedent, you have to affirm the consequent too. If you affirm antecedent, then you have to affirm the consequent also. By affirming the antecedent but denying the consequent, Paravadi is committing a logical error. Now this is the basic idea, because Paravadi, according to Sakavadi, is committing a logical error. Now I think this is interesting, because in the Kathavattu you can see that the whole debate is going according to a logical principle, logical rules. In other words, simply, the Kathavattu author seems to be using this structure. But for some reason in the Indian logic, this kind of symbolic presentation was not given. Because symbolic presentation was developed more in the Western logic. But even though symbolic presentation is not there, you can see that you can put that into symbolic language. And then it makes it very clear. Now, modus ponens structure, if P then Q, P, Q, make it very clear, because the structure is very clear. No words. You can just look at P stands for a proposition or statement or sentence. Q stands for again a proposition, statement or sentence. So you can just see the logical connection. If P then Q, P therefore Q. Okay. So if Paravadi wishes to say that person is known in the sense of real and ultimate fact, then he should also admit that person is known as any other real and ultimate fact is known. Paravadi cannot accept the ultimate reality of Pudgala, but deny the existence of two things as Pudgala as ultimate reality and ultimate reality itself. Now, in a way we can again look at this and see whether Sakavadi's assumption is really right. But anyhow, what Sakavadi says is, seem to be saying is, whenever you talk about Pudgala exists in a real and ultimate sense, you are talking about two different things. You are talking about real and Pudgala as a real thing, and also you are talking about real and ultimate things. In other words, Sakavadi is saying that without admitting the existence of real and ultimate things, you cannot talk about the Pudgala as real and ultimate. Now, Paravadi seems to be thinking, without admitting the existence of real and ultimate things, still Paravadi, he can talk about Pudgala as a real and ultimate thing. So this is the crux of the debate. This is the debate between the two people. Okay. Now, the logical principle behind this, what is called modus ponens. Now we will move to the next one. Paravadi presents the following argument. Now Paravadi's turn. Okay, look at the Paravadi's argument. Paravadi's tapana. If person is not known in the sense of real and ultimate fact, then he should not be known in the same way as the real and ultimate fact is known. Again, if P then Q. Now if person is not known, we can say Pudgala exists. Pudgala, we can say simply, does not exist. I mean, exist and known mean the same thing. The person is not known in the same way as. Now, this is the Paravadi. This is the Pachanika. Pachanika means you put in the negative language. You remember? Sakavadi puts in the positive language. Paravadi puts in the negative language. So, simply Paravadi says, if person is not known in the sense of real and ultimate fact, then he should not be known in the same way as a real and ultimate fact is known. Now, that again you can translate this as to if P, then Q, right? But of course, in Paravadi's case, P is a negative sentence. Q is also a negative sentence, right? That is the only difference. But the logical structure is the same. Logical structure can be put as if P, then Q. Then, Papana, it is not the case. It is not the case means actually in logical language when we say it is not the case that. So it is not the case means simply not. So you deny that particular statement. So there you can see two negatives there, right? You deny. It is not the case that, again, person should not be known. So not Q. So Paravadi rejects Q. So I mean the Q in the sense person should not be known. Now here actually the Theravadi's position. Then if he says that, then he also should say it is not the case that person is not known in the sense of a real and ultimate sense, not P. This is a form of basic modus tollens argument. Modus tollens argument presented by Paravadi. So this is modus tollens. If we take modus tollens argument, we have if P, then Q, we have not Q, therefore we have not P. So this is the conclusion. So opposite of the modus ponens argument is modus tollens argument. Now if you, modus tollens argument is if you reject consequent, you have to reject the antecedent also. Now Paravadi's argument here is Sakavadi rejects consequent but does not reject antecedent. Same mistake done by the Paravadi in the other case, right? To be consistent, Sakavadi has to also say it is not the case that person is not known in the sense of a real and ultimate sense. It is not the case means not. Person is not known in the ultimate sense, ultimate fact. So if you reject that, then what happens is Sakavadi accept that person is known in the real and ultimate sense. So Sakavadi doesn't want to accept it, therefore he doesn't, reject it. So it is not the case, but he doesn't accept that. So in the real logical form, if you say not Q, you have to also say not P. But the problem is, according to Paravadi, Sakavadi says yes to this, but no to this. He doesn't want to. So Paravadi says you are making a logical mistake here. So look at this example carefully, because this is a negative statement, so therefore it can be confusing. Look at it again. If the person is not known in the sense of real and ultimate sense, the fact, then he should not be known in the same way as real and ultimate fact is known. Now simply you can translate this as if P, then Q. So Papana, it is not the case that the person should not be known in the same and ultimate sense. Fact is known, not Q. Okay. Sakavadi accept that. Aropana, it is not the case that person is not known in the sense of a real and ultimate fact, not P. Now, Sakavadi doesn't accept not P, although he accepts not Q. This is the form of basic modus tollens argument. According to Paravadi, Sakavadi denies the consequent, not P, but does not deny the antecedent, P. Does not deny the antecedent. But when you deny the consequent, you have to deny the antecedent too. By denying the consequent, but not denying the antecedent, Sakavadi is committing a logical error. So now you can see that Paravadi is attributing a similar, the logical error to Sakavadi. Sakavadi denies that person should not be known as any real and ultimate fact is known. But if he denies it, then he has also to deny that person is not known in the sense of a real and ultimate fact. He has to deny that person is not known. Now when you say no to person is not known, then what it means is you accept that person is known. You see the point? When you say no to no, you comes to positive statement, then you accept that person is known in the sense of real and ultimate fact, which Sakavadi doesn't want to accept. Clear? I know that it may take a little bit some time to be clear, but basic two logical rules are very simple. The first one is if P then Q, P therefore Q. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Logically, the paragraph is a little bit similar, but not identically same.
Yes, I mean two different things are happening. Basic thing is the same, if P then Q. Here what you do is you accept the antecedent, then you accept the consequent also. There you can't go like that. There what happens is you deny the consequent, then you deny the antecedent also. It's something like this.
How can we say P and Q is the same? If the statement is false, P and Q is equal to, you can say like that.
Say it again.
So not equal, so you can deny. Because it is asking the sense, it's different.
Yes, yes. Let me think about somewhat simpler example for modus tollens.
In the positive, it's okay, but negative.
Yeah.
Negative is little
So you know, P and Q, if you accept P, you must accept Q. But in that case, it should be the formal statement, P and Q is the same. So P and Q is the same.
Let me try an example. We say if it rains, the well will be full. Now, if it rains, you can say then the well will be full. So this is Q, this is P, right? So we can say P implies Q, right? When we say number 2, the well is not full, not Q. Therefore, we say, therefore, it does not rain, not P. So this is a pretty simple example. Now, for example, we say that if it rains, the well will be full, right? Then we say the well is not full, which means that it has not rained. Because if it rains, really the well has to be full, right? The position is, now if you say the well is not the full, but then how can you say that it rained? You can't say it rained, because if it rained, well has to be full. If the well is not full, then you clearly know that it has not rained. So this is what the Paravadi says. If you say no to the consequent, you have to say no to the antecedent also. Because raining is a good enough reason for well to be filled, right? So on the other hand, if you look at it this way, look at this way, we can say if it rains, the well will be full. Then we say it did not rain. But can you say well is not full? Why?
It is rain sometimes. It's heavy rain.
No, simply there can be somebody just brought water and put to the well. So rain is the not only reason, right? Rain is not the only reason for the well to be full. But on the other hand, if it rains, the well has to be full anyway. So you see the antecedent and the consequent, the connection. So this is a simple modus tollens argument. P implies Q, not Q, therefore not P. You can go to not P. So the modus tollens argument is this. So modus tollens argument, the only difficulty in this particular case is the statement is put in the negative manner. Because there are two nots, so therefore carefully, you can have a look again, look at it. If person is not known in the sense of real and ultimate sense, then he should not be known in the same way as real and ultimate. Now, that negative sentence is P and the other negative sentence is Q. Then of course, the idea is that it is not the case that person should not be known in the same way as real and ultimate fact is known. That means you deny the Q. Then, of course, you have to deny P also. It is not the case that person is not known in the sense of a real and ultimate fact. But the moment you say that, Sakavadi is indirectly accepting that person is known in the real and ultimate sense, which he doesn't want to accept. See, so he says that you are making a logical mistake. Now, so here you can see modus tollens argument and then modus ponens argument. Now, interesting thing is you can see how the Kathavattu debate is based on certain logical rules, logical principles, okay? You can simply translate into these things. So, what we can do is look at this carefully, and then if you have any also questions, we can discuss further again. But do you have any questions or comments or anything about it for the moment? It is important for us to have some knowledge in the basic logical rules and then how they are put into symbolic language. Actually, there are some academic efforts where, you know, the teachings in the discourses have been put into logical form. I think some Watanabe or somebody wrote, a Japanese scholar a long time ago wrote a book. I mean, in that book he tries to put into logical form. So it's important because, you know, when you put something into logical form, I mean, if the logical structure is a valid thing, so you can see it is valid logical structure. However, there is an important distinction between something being valid and something being true. I will also discuss some other time that, but basically when I say something is valid, it means it is logically valid. But it doesn't mean it is necessarily true or not. Okay? But it means simply, pardon me? Yeah, logically valid means it follows the logical rule. But it could be factually wrong, right? Because sometimes, you know, we can prove logically certain things that are not accepted. So valid. Here what we are saying is, if you have the structure of if P then Q, P therefore Q, or if you have the structure if P then Q, not Q therefore not P, then we have a logically valid structure. But still, we don't know whether it is true or not. That we can argue more. But at least, if you can present a logically valid argument, it has some merit. Suppose you are in the courthouse, you are arguing a case. What matters is whether it is logically valid. True or not doesn't matter very much. If you can prove it, you win. But proving doesn't mean, yeah, you know, it could be otherwise. So, yeah, Reverend, you have the question?
At first, he made logical mistake because
it would be really helpful if some of you can write your question and give it to him, because I don't get sometimes the total meaning. But anyhow, I will try my best, okay? Bill will be slow, okay.
He explained you are also logically wrong, and his denying method, logically denying method is very interesting. But I don't understand how he make his one denying Parawari. How he make his proposition, his anti-proposition to Parawari.
Parawadi.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How he make
Well, no, Reverend, the interesting thing here is this. Both Sakavadi and Paravadi seem to be equal here. Because Sakavadi says to Paravadi, you violated the logical rule. And Paravadi says in the same manner, you violated the logical rule. But what I am saying is, we know that both are valid. But who is telling the truth has to be decided more going into the Dhamma. You understand? Now, for example, Sakavadi's argument seems to be that Sakavadi says, okay, my friend, when you say Pudgala is known according to real and ultimate fact, Sakavadi seems to be saying, look, there are two things you make. Number one, there are real and ultimate facts. Number two, Pudgala is a real and ultimate fact. So what Sakavadi does is, Sakavadi really analyzes Paravadi's statement into two. Or Sakavadi shows that your statement has unstated assumption. Unstated assumption. Unstated assumption is that there are real and ultimate facts. And Pudgala is one of them. Now, to that, Paravadi don't want to say yes. Paravadi would say yes to Pudgala is ultimate fact, But Paravadi doesn't want to say that. In addition to that, there are real and ultimate facts. It looks like the case. So we can debate on that, whether that is implied by that, whether Paravadi is really committed to that kind of thing simply by saying that Pudgala is not known in the real and ultimate sense. So that is open for debate. But what is not open for debate is logical structure. Yes, logical structure seem to be okay. But then logical structure wise, both Sakavadi and Paravadi are okay. Because both have logical rules for their support. Both have logical rules for their support. Yes, yes.
What I understand is in the first statement, the question, it has like a conventional word. Somewhat conventional, samudi,
The?
convention.
Okay.
Convention like Kokala or something else. They ask in this way, and then they accept this question in this range, in this domain.
Right.
And then they ask another information in another domain. So in another domain, in another sense, the word, the former word is wrong. So it cannot be.
You think two different meanings, two different.
Even in the book also too.
Same word, different domain. In the first question, Kokala or something. So
Right.
we use in conventional, we use this word. But in the second question, when he accept this one, this is true in the conventional truth. But in the second
So you think it's a difference between Sambhuti and Paramartha, conventional language and...
in a different range.
Yeah,
in a different domain,
Right.
yes.
That could be too, but on the other hand, ultimately, Pudgalavadi, why he rejects this is ultimately according to Pudgalavadi, Pudgala is something ineffable that cannot be described by language, something like that. That's the position I think Pudgalavadi holds. That's why, he makes this assertion. Okay, he wants to say that Pudgala is real and ultimate, but he doesn't want to admit that real and ultimate objects exist. But what is wrong with admitting real and ultimate objects exist? I think what is wrong with that is when you accept that there are real and ultimate facts, we are going beyond our sensory experience. And then Sakavadi doesn't want to, accept that kind of thing. So in Sakavadi's view, accepting such a thing is a weakness. Or giving in too much into the metaphysical things, which can be a justification of soul. Right? Because then, if you accept that kind of category, then you are opening for many other similar things to come in. Maybe perhaps that's a reason. Yeah. But we are not exactly sure. But what we can do is really look at the, if we are okay with the validity, then we can see truthfulness of whether it is really true. But that's open for debate. We can really keep on debating about it. In logical language, we are talking about two concepts. One is the validity. The other concept is soundness. When we say argument is valid, it means that argument is logically valid. Like it follows the logical rule. It has the correct structure. However, when I say argument is a sound argument, it means argument is not only logically valid, it also is true. That is the meaning of the word sound. So sound argument is both logically valid and true. But valid argument may or may not be true. That's the basic difference.
So you saw that the debate takes place by means of 5 steps.
Yes.
And next you saw the Tapana, Bapana, and Aropana. So how?
Yeah, the connection between these 5 and 3 is a little bit tricky thing. But actually, the five thing is the verbal presentation. Verbal presentation. Tapana, papana, aropana is the logical principle used in that. So this is the connection. Tapana, papana, aropana is the logical principle behind it. But the Pachanika or that method, Patikam, Upanaya, that is the presentation. So, Reverend, one is the structure of the presentation. Tapana, papana, aropana is the logical principle in that. In one, we are talking about the structure of the presentation. That's not something logical we are talking. But what I said is later it developed to be a standard syllogism in Indian logic. But that happened later. But in the Kathavattu, first thing you see is how the debate is going between the two. Now that is what this Attaniggaha. But if you analyze the Attaniggaha is based on logical rules. Logical rules are basically here for this purpose, modus ponens and modus tollens. Now, not only that, Reverend, if anyone is really more interested in this, there is lot work has been done by scholars on this, particularly K.N. Jaytilaka's early Buddhist theory of knowledge has a discussion on that, and he refers to some German scholars who have done that. So, a lot of people have done much work long time ago, not even now. So, if we are really interested in logical principles used in Kathavattu, we need to really go into those literature. And in German language, there are some references K.N. Jaytilaka refers to. So, there's quite a lot of, the discussions and material you find in these things. I mean, I'm not going to go into that too much logic, because I know that can be too much, but I'm just showing to you, how the basic argument is presented. Now, if we are okay up to this point, in my next discussion, what I will like to do is, based on the discussion up to today, I want to read with you Puggala Katha. Yeah, the first chapter. First chapter, read in Pali, translating into English, and then we will keep on reading, okay? So, that will be a more of I will be continuing with reading, but of course, reading and discussing. So, review the things I did up to this point, okay? Because these things will be helpful for you to understand the structure. And then after Puggala Katha, if we have time, maybe I will discuss a couple of more things. Yeah. No, I mean, we will first discuss the Puggala Katha, Kathavattu. And then if we can complete that, then we will go to several selected kathas of the Kathavattu. Okay, folks, so I will wind up for today. I will see you afternoon. We will discuss research methodology. Okay.
Amen.